It's a great pleasure to welcome you to MNN, Manhattan Network, and to public access to cable television. And I'm looking forward to learning a great deal. And bear with my ignorance, as is the case with a good deal of the audience, I wager. But in any event, in the audience, welcome very, very much to Conversations, where we have as a guest for this 58-minute program, Maqbool Mohammad. He has a very interesting life story to talk to. And he's originally from northwest frontier province of Pakistan, and he's been in military service. He was a colonel in the military service of the country of Pakistan. He's served in Africa. He's with the UN now on the peacekeeping logistics aspects of the peacekeeping efforts of that entity. And Maqbool, welcome very, very much to Conversations. I wonder if maybe you could share your own background, born and raised a little, and then we'll talk about a number of instances, but maybe you could sort of introduce yourself to the audience, if you would, please.
Thanks, Harold, for having
pleasure.
me for this conversation. And like we discussed before, I'm here in my own personal capacity,
Yes.
and I don't really represent the UN, but it was after having a look at your program, the conversation, I thought it was very, very interesting. And I come from a background which is about which very little is known to the world.
Yes, particularly I would say here in the United States, perhaps, and that's why you can
true.
help enlighten
Yeah.
us in a very good way.
Yeah.
Mm.
I'm a Pashtun
Yeah.
by birth, and I come from a very remote location of even northwest frontier province, which is remote in its own self. But I come from a city called Bannu. And Bannu is unique these days because all the action or the ground zero of terrorism is in that area. Bannu is very close to Waziristan, and we all know about Waziristan, what's going on, and what Pakistan is facing and what the world is facing.
Indeed.
So I come from that background, and I was born in a very conservative Pashtun family, and even in those days, my father was an educated person. He was an engineer, and he was always telling us to go forward and get educated. So that was something which the advantage that I had when I was a child.
Is that a Pashtun attribute of the Pashtun thing? Is the respect for education and discipline?
That's Pashtuns are raised by tradition.
Okay.
We live by traditions.
Right.
Tradition is something that is the honor for Pashtuns, and tradition is basically, we say I'm conservative, but conservative is a definition in its own self, and
Yes,
it's very relative. Everywhere conservative would be different. For us, a conservative is listening to your elders, and that is it. That's the last word in your life till you're growing, until you're a grown-up person.
And to the elders be true. And I think that's true of cultures around the world, and it's probably been good advice over the long development of human society.
That's true. And
to anchor with history.
That's right. And so with this background, it's so interesting that today we are in a situation where probably we shouldn't have been, but we are in it.
By we, you mean the world?
Well, I say the world in general,
Yeah.
Northwest Frontier Province in particular.
Okay, or Pakistan, or...
we could increase that particular
Afghanistan.
Afghanistan, Pakistan.
Yeah.
These are difficult times.
Yes, indeed.
And the people of that area are fighting whatever is coming up very bravely. That is another aspect probably the world doesn't know, but coming from that area, knowing about what's happening in Swat, knowing about what happened to these IDPs, 3 million people displaced within months from Swat.
Yes, right.
And it was, if it wasn't for the traditional 3 million, 3 million. I mean, it's probably one of the largest displacement of the modern history.
Yeah, there was,
when people had to leave their homes.
There's been displacement from Afghanistan into Pakistan on large dimension
that's
also
right.
over the longer
That was
haul.
more about refugees coming from Afghanistan
Exactly,
to Pakistan.
yeah, right.
Pakistan. But this was a displacement within a country, which was very, very huge in nature, and it happened. And I would say it was again for the Pashtun culture, the integrated way that we live and we love, and we are hospitable, that people were given refuge very quickly. We had these IDP camps which were formed very quickly, and I'm not really discounting the efforts of the government of Pakistan or the world, because it was a united front, overwhelming, and people really helped. And the best thing about this was about the resilience of these Pashtun is that when the things started improving, we were able to get the people back to their homes.
Okay.
The main problem about IDPs is that when they are internally displaced, it's very difficult to settle them back.
It is.
And these people have been able to go back.
And there was a great deal of Pashtun involvement on that.
It was.
I wonder if we could talk a little bit about Pashtun more. The Pashtun culture and peoples that are Pashtun also lapse over into Afghanistan.
Well, Pashtuns are in Afghanistan and in Pakistan.
In equal measure?
In sort of equal measure. I would say, you know, if I look at the total population of Pashtuns in the whole world, but I would rather go by regions.
Yes.
In this region alone, I think we have about 40 million. No, I could be wrong.
Did you say 40?
40 million.
40 million.
40 million Pashtuns.
My Lord.
Out of these, about 24 million would be in Pakistan, and the rest would be in Afghanistan.
I see.
And we also have some Pashtuns who are in India.
Also in India?
Also in India. You have Pashtun, you have a lot of Khans, you've heard about.
Yes.
The Khans of India.
Yes,
the very famous film stars of India.
Exactly.
So Pashtuns are in this area. They're mostly in the northwest part of Pakistan, and then in the eastern part of Afghanistan.
Would it be involving Kandahar or not?
It does involve Kandahar. All this area, Kandahar, Kabul, Jalalabad, these are all Pashtun areas.
And the language is unique?
The language is unique. It's Pashto.
Pashto.
It's Pashto. That's what we call it. Now, within Pashto, we have dialects. We have local dialects. Like I come from Bannu.
Yeah.
So we call our dialect Bannuchi, which is slightly different to the dialect of people from Mardan, again, Peshawar, Sawat. And so people from Waziristan, there would be a slight difference in the dialect, but the language itself is called Pashto and spoken in, it's written the same way in Afghanistan, it's written the same way in Pakistan.
And there would be a commonality of identity between the Pashtun and Afghanistan and Pakistan?
There is a commonality, although since Pashtuns are divided into tribes, there would be some tribes which are in Pakistan, they may not be in Afghanistan. There would be some tribes which are in Afghanistan, we may not be having them in Pakistan.
That's characteristic of the region in large measure.
That's right, yeah.
It's a tribal orientation.
It is tribal orientation.
Identity,
and that tribal orientation itself, the pride of being from a tribe brings in a lot of discipline within the different clans.
Right, and it could go way back in history.
It goes way back in history, yeah. I mean, to trace the origin of Pashtuns, it goes back to hundreds of years.
Hundreds of years.
And there are various versions where did the Pashtuns come from. There's a version that they came from Arab. There's also a version that they're a tribe of Israel. That's you know there is a tribe in Pashtuns which is called Yusufzai. Now Yusufzai is sometimes taken as sons of Joseph.
Okay.
So it's a very, very interesting history. There's also another saying that they are Aryans from their background. Aryan from their background.
Is part of the Indo-European language group?
It is the Pashto itself sort of comes out of Persian. I mean, it's very close to Persian. Persian, yeah.
Okay.
It's very close in the way it's written, in the way it's spoken, in the way it is. It's the softness about it.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it poetic?
It is very poetic.
It is poetic.
It is.
That's
Pashto
always a good sign.
Pashto is very poetic, and they're very renowned poets from Pashtuns.
Okay.
Rahman Baba, Khushal Khan Kharak. Now these were very revolutionary poets.
Are Shakespeare's.
They are sort of Shakespeare's, you can say. They're very, Pashtuns are proud of these poets.
There's a strong identity with the Pashtun identity by the Pashtun.
By the Pashtuns,
unique from Afghani association or national identity, or Pakistani for that matter, would you say? Or how do we do? That's a question inherent to all the world because we have many divisions of identity.
You know, it's a fact of history that we have Pashtun in two countries. It's also has fact of history that we have Punjabis in two countries.
Okay, yeah.
Bengalis in two countries.
That's right.
Now these are the lines which were created over a period of time because of different reasons. Where did the Pashtun come from? How are they in NWFP? Why do you have the Durand line? Why do we have
Durand
this
line?
This is I mean, it's for really the historians to figure out.
Yeah.
But over a period of time, since we have settled in our own countries where we are, we are more synonymous to the culture of the overall culture of our own countries.
Right.
So there would be a difference between an Afghani and a Pakistani in some ways.
Yeah, and that's
although it may not be in a big way, and they may sort of look very much alike culturally.
And that's been a very important part geostrategically of the world since Alexandria. I think they used to call it Bactria in Alexander's time.
That's right. I mean, one of the tribes of Pashtuns, which is Afridis, feel they are from the Alexander. You know, so it's very interesting. Yeah.
I have a relative. His name was George Nicholas Channer, and he was a general officer. And he won the Victoria Cross for action in Malaya, way back in the Indian forces, back in the 19th century. And he was the charge of the garrison at Kandahar in the 19th century. And so that's part of the family background. I mean, you know, it's associated with England and so forth. But the British were there. Lord Kitchener, the Durand Line, and the British Empire was there, and it was India was thought of as the jewel in the crown, and all of that. So that's part of the more recent history.
Yeah, that's part of the more recent history.
And it's been a place of dispute and conflict a good deal throughout the recent history.
That's right. I really,
and it remains so. A focal point.
I would sort of differ with that a bit.
Okay, good.
I think the people of that region are very friendly by nature.
Okay.
And I don't think they really want a conflict.
Okay.
If they wanted a conflict, we would have had very bloody conflicts.
Well, we've had some conflict there.
We have had some wars, and those are things. But if I speak for the people of this region, which I have very widely traveled, and I understand. I do know quite a lot about this region, I reach a conclusion that probably whatever is happening is very unnatural. It is really we shouldn't be having any wars in this region. We have had conflicts in the region. India, Pakistan has had conflicts.
I would submit you had experience. You became a colonel in the Pakistani army.
I was in the army, but I was in the army at a time where we didn't have a conflict for all the period that I was there.
It seems to me, if I may, and forgive my ignorance, and I reflect the ignorance of the American people largely, but it seems to me that there is a great deal of existential danger sensed by the Pakistani forces directed toward the country of India, and that there is a conflict that's been there between India, and there's a worry about the Kashmir question that has been there and so forth, and that a good deal of the strategic thinking has to do with concern for India to your east. I don't know if I'm right or wrong on that, but maybe you can set me straight.
I would honestly not really go into a lot of details because that becomes a very political statement.
Okay. We don't want to go anywhere you don't want to.
I would just say that I was in the Army from 72 to 98.
Okay, right.
It's about 26 years in
the Army.
Yeah,
right.
We didn't have a conflict with India.
You didn't have a
we
sense
did not
of...
We did not have a war. We didn't have a conflict. And why I'm saying that is...
Well, there have been wars.
Yes.
Between those
two 26 years that I was in the Army, we didn't have one. And the reason I'm emphasizing on that is because we had a conflict in 48. We had a conflict in 65. There was a war in 71. We did not have a conflict for very long. And I attribute it to the leaders and the people of the area, of the region, who didn't want a war.
Of the South Asian area.
Of India and Pakistan and this region. the people don't want to have a war, so there was never a war.
I think generally people probably, if they had their, what we call druthers, if they had their choice, would not particularly like the idea of going to war. They have to be ginned up by people who have an interest in
exactly,
that.
That's true. Now, why did we have conflicts? You know, there's a lot of history to it, and I really don't want to go into those details. But I'm very optimistic.
You are good.
I'm very
happy to hear
optimistic,
that.
and despite all these tensions that we may have in the region, I think the leaders of all these countries that are involved in these conflicts, and the people, and the intelligentsia, and the civil society, they're working very hard to have a long-lasting peace.
Oh, I'm happy to hear that.
And it's true. It may not be visible. It may not be really visible here. But when you go back to your country, when I go back, I do have this sense that people don't want a war. They want peace. Be it India, be it any other neighbor.
You're working in peacekeeping and peace efforts at the UN now. Jumping ahead in terms of your biography.
Yeah, I actually, you know, after I left Army, I joined UN because I always really wanted to join UN. UN was an organization that you could really look at as one of, if I don't want to overstate, one of the best things that happened to the world after the World War II.
I think maybe a lot of the last best chance for mankind, in a certain sense, the institutional structure that we have. There are all kinds of problems in a world where we have nation states with interests and variegating interests and so forth. But it's the institutional structure that's there in a skeletal way is very important to the future of the world. It seems to me, and should be supported.
So it is. I think it's one of the best things that happened to the world in terms, like just you said, in the way it's structured, in the way it's supported by the member states. It's really, I think it's one organization which has been having all the support from all the member states with all the sincerity. So that's why after my Army career, I wanted to join UN, and I joined UN, and I basically joined UN in a conflict zone. I went to Sierra Leone.
Sierra Leone.
I was in Sierra Leone.
In the middle of that
in
violence.
In the middle of all that violence and all that thing. And
horrible things going on.
And what was amazing to see was that, which I was never exposed to earlier, that in a conflict zone like that, we had people from all over the world, international civil servants, UN, NGOs, white, black, every color, every caste, every language. And they were there, they were endangering their own lives and everything, but they were there to help the people of Sierra Leone.
And the people needed it because there was tremendous violence in Sierra Leone.
People needed it. The member states felt it that way. We had a peacekeeping mission there. And the end was good. There were elections held, and now Sierra Leone is a peaceful country.
Oh, but there was a lot of violence in between.
There was a lot of violence when the rebel groups were controlling almost more than 70% of the country.
Yeah, and terrible unleashing of violence in the worst kind of way.
So when I said that United Nations has been one of the best things that have happened to the world, its effect, its efforts in peacekeeping and peace building, in getting into these conflicts and separating them and bringing good to the people, is one thing that UN has really achieved. Now these are some of the areas, but then the humanitarian areas, UNICEF, anything that you can think of. So for me,
your work involved you with UNICEF and
when I was
UNESCO?
When I was in Sierra Leone, I was a field security officer for all the UN agencies.
For all the UN agencies, they're trying to deal with a very difficult
situation. I was sort of, I had the privilege of looking at their work, and I felt proud to be a part of that team. Because
and you went right from your military to that coast. I see in your bio you also served a couple of years in the Congo, where there's a great deal of awfully ugly things going on now.
After my military career, it was after about a year or so that I went to Sierra Leone.
Can you remember what caused you to make that decision, or was it an opportunity that presented itself, or was it your career path, if you could see it? Or?
Yeah, it was sort of both. One was that the values of the UN attract you.
Had they, from your early youth?
From my
Were
early
you-
youth, for the way you look at the UN, the way you see UN, we have been exposed to the UN peacekeeping when I was in the military.
Were you well trained in terms of, well, certainly by discipline, but well trained in terms of understanding the world through your training in the Pakistani military training? Do you
Pakistan
think
military
education?
Pakistan military does a great deal in training its people. It's really it's at its best when it imparts training to the soldiers, officers.
Overall, in Pakistan, the military is a very important and powerful force for
It is.
unity.
It is. It's a very important force because it's not only that it is supposed to be defending the borders of the country. It's also an SOS organization for the country. So it's been involved in all kind of humanitarian activities, whether there are floods, where there was this huge earthquake in Kashmir.
Yeah.
Army was
Awful.
at the forefront because it has manpower, it has resources, it has trained and disciplined people that could do it. So Pakistan Army has been doing a great deal of other works than what it's supposed to be doing as an army.
Yeah.
But most of the armies are actually trained that way.
Yeah, I
It's
know.
not only-
Yeah.
Most of the armies are trained that way. But Pakistan Army has been involved in a lot of humanitarian activities within the country.
Don't mean to make a fine point on it. Was it a British tradition that you used, Sandhurst, that kind of thing, in terms of after 1947 forming a military
We
contingent?
inherited some of the training from the British.
Yeah.
But over a period of time, we have changed it, and we've changed a great deal to suit our own environment and to suit our own requirements.
Right.
So we have, immediately after 1947, there was nothing. So
It was
naturally,
a big displacement. I think the largest displacement of humanity in the history of the world was
right.
following
Yeah,
47, the division of the India subcontinent. Yeah.
So coming back to my UN, so that's how I really joined the UN, and then I was since I knew peacekeeping when I was in the army. We contributed.
Was that part of
troops.
your education and so forth? And
It is.
as a military officer. And you became
officer.
a colonel. That's a large. That's just below general rank.
I was a lieutenant colonel.
A lieutenant. colonel.
We still call him colonels, but
Sure,
sure,
it is a colonel.
It's a colonel. Yes, that's the rank.
And that's comparable to a colonel in the American system?
No, we have a lieutenant colonel in the American system also.
Yeah,
we have a colonel, so it's the same.
It is the same.
It's the same.
Okay.
Ranks are almost the same all over the world.
They are. Okay. They comport.
Exactly, and that is that can be seen when the different armies meet for anything.
Do you think people who've had a military, we have for general officers, we have a war college that people go to and so on. So there's a commonality of seeing the world that comes out of a military focus by military leadership, the officer leadership, that gives a certain camaraderie between militarily trained people in decision-making process for the various nations of the world. There's a certain camaraderie and understanding of the world among the military leadership of the world.
There is, because what we do is at the senior ranks, there's a lot of exchange programs.
I should think.
We have Pakistani military officers coming to America for training.
You trained here in the United States for a while.
I came here in
To where?
'88
Where'd
for
you
Fort
go?
Lee, Virginia.
Fort Lee, how long were you there?
It was for 3 months.
Oh, only 3 months, okay.
But it was a great experience. So we have that exchange program. We send our officers. We also get officers in our war college, in our staff colleges from all over the world. So there is.
You mean as faculty? Or as teachers?
As students.
Oh, as students. I see. Okay, right. Okay.
We don't have faculty from outside. Our faculty is all indigenous in Pakistan.
Okay.
And the same is, I'm not too sure about the American institutions, but they do get some faculty from other friendly countries, or from the country that they have some kind of a pact with. But that exchange really exposes us to the other countries and how really things work in other countries. So
and it's been a dynamic time, a challenging time. After all, you started with Mr. Jinnah, you started a country almost out of whole cloth and so forth, that kind of thing. Really and one of the major centripetal, one of the forces that holds a nation together, which is an essential for a political entity, is at various levels military. Military has been an important force or source of security and unity for the country of Pakistan, maybe not only in good times, but also when things get dicey and difficult. And it's an important part of what holds the country together, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do. Military is an important part of the country because it is one of the most organized institutions that we have. One of the most trained, one of the most organized institutions. I would say whether military is a reason to hold the country together, I would really not agree with that.
Okay.
I think it's more about the political leadership. Military normally doesn't come into politics. We have had incidents where we have had military leaders coming into politics. But the primary role of the army is to defend the country's borders, ideological borders, and so military does play an important role. But I would say it is the political leadership which plays a more important role in keeping the country together.
And those wars that you fought were largely over, if I'm not mistaken, help me straight, over an issue of Kashmir has been a very big issue of dissension between India and Pakistan.
Yeah.
You have Sardar Qayyum Khan in Azad Kashmir, the war up in the north, that sort of thing.
That's right. I mean, and I'm not really saying something which is new. Kashmir has been a problem.
Real problem, and remains.
And I think over a period of time we have moved forward on resolving this issue.
You think?
Yeah. We have. And we have been very near some time in resolving this issue. But again, I would really leave it to the judgment of the leaders of both sides. What is important is that probably the people would not really want to have a conflict. It's better that these issues are resolved through dialogues.
It would be very good if we could resolve our issues through dialogue more than we have out of history.
And that is the only hope. We would only be able to resolve these issues with dialogue.
And a good place to be in order to pursue that dream or that view of human development is the United Nations itself, and you've taken yourself there. Congratulations.
I would really say that, because UN has done an incredible job. I belong to the UN. I'm a part of the UN family, but I'm not really saying that because I'm part of it, but because it has done a great job. And UN does not believe in conflicts. UN believes in resolution. UN believes in dialogue. UN believes in talking, and all our Secretary Generals have been really pushing hard. You would always find our Secretary General wherever there's a conflict. They're there to help, to support it.
Well, yes, in some measure, but sometimes that Rwanda thing was allowed to go, and things without actively able to do much about violence that broke out. We have a hard time because we still live in a world where sovereignty is at the nation-state level. And so it's difficult. And then there's differences within the various countries.
Yeah, that's true. But I wouldn't really comment on what happened in Rwanda because
horrible.
Yeah, things didn't go well. But I would still say that UN. It was still, there were UN people who saved lives.
Who tried, and there were people within the UN that were trying against the centrifugal forces that are working against the peaceful resolution.
There were soldiers, UN soldiers, very little in number, but they laid their life, but they really tried to save whatever they could.
Yeah, and under the limits of realpolitik is what they were able to manage.
They did, yeah. So if I have to sum up UN, I would say it's a great organization.
You were in the Congo for a couple of years?
Was
that with the UN?
Yes, I was in the Congo for about 2 years.
Okay.
Like I said, I'm a logistician. My office, my department that I belong to, we provide support to all the peacekeeping or all the field missions around the world. So we we're more interested in, providing the material support. And
it must be satisfying to be part of an organization that is supporting peacekeeping.
It is
efforts on the part of the nations of the world.
That's right. It is.
Yeah.
It's very, and that's why I was still in New York when I went to Congo for about 2 years to be a part of the peacekeeping operation there.
When you went to Sierra Leone, was that with the United Nations?
It was with the United Nations, but
with
not with the peacekeeping. I was in a different position. I was with the United Nations agencies.
And how long were you in the Sierra Leone?
I was there for about a year and a half till the peacekeeping forces.
Were you there in the midst of the worst of the violence?
Well, I actually arrived there in June '99 when the worst. I wouldn't say the worst was over, because the rebels had withdrawn from Freetown, where they came and they did all those things. But for most of my time, for the year and a half almost that I was there, the country was still under other forces, not the government forces, and things were still happening around the country. And in these dangers, we were the humanitarian agency, the NGOs, was still reaching up to the people, even in the rebel-held areas, to bring them food, medicines, and everything. So that was a different role. And then I joined Department of Peacekeeping in the year 2000, August 2000.
Was that in Congo?
No, I came. It was in New York.
Oh, here you worked in New York.
I worked in New York.
Again, in the peacekeeping.
In the peacekeeping.
Logistics and trying to how you can make that work in a practical sense.
Logistics means logistics in all areas. You provide logistics to peacekeeping missions, and that includes the civilians, that includes the international staff, the peacekeeping troops from various countries.
Peacekeeping troops, and also activities toward, if there was an effective way you could get mosquito netting to ward off malaria, there would be agencies.
There were agencies.
You would help that be realized if you could. Something that would be really peacekeeping and beneficial to the people are being done through the agencies that you work with.
That's right.
It must be very satisfying to be in that side of the dialectic.
It is very satisfying. And I was in Congo for 2 years, and from 2005 till 2007. And the peacekeeping operation had been there for about 4 or 5 years till then. And we came a long way. We were able to, the UN was able to hold elections to help. I wouldn't say UN was able to hold elections, because it's the duty of the government, and they did it. But the UN was able to facilitate and support the election process, a very successful election. And it takes time.
Sure.
But the UN has been successful in whatever they wanted to achieve, and they're still there.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. You were in the Congo, you were in the Sierra Leone, you have an interest in the continent of Africa? Do you have an interest in that? And I wonder if you keep track of things that are going on, like we used to have the Organization of African Unity, and now we have the African Union.
That's right.
And now there was a gathering of, I don't know, more than half of the heads of state of that continent to try and establish the grounding principles and actual institutional structures to establish an entity called the United States of Africa. It may not be fair, but I wonder, do you think that might be something that might mimic the European Union or something of that sort, in terms of common interests of that continent that has been so ill-served in terms of its people by the technological development and so forth? But I don't know if you've been following that, or if it's relevant.
I really know. I haven't been following that, because that's a bit of sort of away from what I do.
Okay.
It's more political, and there are a lot of initiatives going on. And I, like I said, I'm an optimist. The leader of a region, whatever they're doing, I think they're doing. They all want to go in a positive direction. And they want to do something good for the people. Africa has come a long way, and if you go to Africa
from
today,
from when you were there, you think?
No, I'm talking of old times and the new Africa. There's a lot of difference, a lot of development, a lot of education, a lot of. I mean, people want to move forward. People don't want to be in conflict. They want to live in peace. They want to live in happiness, and the world has been helping them too, which sort of encourages the people to take their own future ahead, because after all, it's them themselves who have to do something for them. So I haven't been really following that United States of Africa thing.
Oh,
and
okay. Well, it's only just
yeah,
happening
but-
now,
yeah,
really,
but,
you know, and they're
But
trying.
I think any initiative that the leaders of a region would take would be probably in the best interest of their own people.
If there are, and they do have common interests, as humanity
They
has
do,
common
they do,
interests.
exactly.
The
They
UN itself is a certain sense of step in that hopeful direction of finding unity among all the peoples
and
of the
UN
world.
always does that. UN always steps into wherever UN is needed or wherever UN can help. UN does help.
And now with the technology and so forth is moving so quickly, particularly in communications. I think every little village in Africa or in the rest of the world now has a cell phone connection to the internet, and it's making, the technology is bringing huge changes, much of which could be very positive.
It's amazing. You know, you go to these small villages and people have cell phones, people are starting to have computers in places where there's no electricity, but people are doing something to
they
keep.
get that.
I think communication, IT, has brought the world much closer, and probably we understand each other much better than what we used to sometimes back. We have direct access to what's happening in Africa, what's happening in Asia, what is happening in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in India, or Sri Lanka, whatever we want.
And all the world has
exactly
that.
all
whereas
the world.
They were very
Everybody
isolated
has.
in the past. They wouldn't know anything beyond their village hardly, but now they're beginning to take on an aura of world citizenship, which is serving well the UN
exactly, and this whole culture of blogs, it's amazing.
I know.
Anybody can talk to anybody, and you can express your ideas, and you can talk, you can communicate with you. We did not have this communication.
Not at all. It was a dream. Who could have thought that would be happening? I mean, and now they got Twitter, and they can, and the kids can do, and it's very encouraging that the children can play the computer and know how to make it work.
That's
the way Vladimir Horowitz plays the piano. And the older people are a little bit delicate. I mean, a little bit behind. And there's a thing in the good book of the Christian tradition that the children shall lead you. I think perhaps the children might be able to lead us into a peaceful existence.
Exactly, because
and we could listen to the youth.
Want to play. The children want to talk.
Also, back to the general theme you have. You said everybody wants to have peace. In a sense. I mean, if you were to ask an individual person, they would love to have peace and prosperity for all their people and so forth. It's a universal characteristic of human consciousness.
And I really, I haven't seen anyone who doesn't want peace. People still want to fight. But they really don't want to fight because they like fighting. And I'm just talking of, it's a general statement, but it is true to say most of the people. People want peace.
I wonder if it's almost a characteristic of the species. You know, in a genetic
probably
sense,
it is the characteristic of the species. And I give this example a lot. I'll give an example of New York. It's an amazing city.
It surely is.
Manhattan,
it's the most amazing city in the history of the world, I think.
It's just unbelievable. And you can only think about the way it's amazing is only when you're here. You have all nationalities.
It's true.
You have all people on a daily basis. I'm sure you come across a Pakistani, you come across a Bangladeshi, you come across an Indian, you come across an Egyptian, Greek,
South American, don't forget South American, Indonesian,
Japanese,
Polynesian,
Chinese.
It is. I think it's wonderful.
And we all stand in the same queue. We all stand in the same line.
Right.
We are all very friendly, and we are all there to help each other. September 11. I think it was everybody wanted to be on the site after that tragedy, and everybody wanted to help. There was no nationality, there was no religion, there was nothing. It was, so that is a display of how people really want to be with each other, how they want to help each other. In general, people don't want to fight. They don't want conflict.
What causes, one thing I would say, I've had friends in our 192 countries, sovereign states represented in the UN, the United Nations, and we have apparently in the New York City area sizable communities of 189 of the 192 countries that exist in the world in the New York City area. Everybody in the world is here.
Everybody I think it's wonderful. Is here, and
what a great place for the UN to be.
And I tell you, if you walk into the cafeteria, you would see
at the UN.
At the UN, you would see people from all nationalities, people from nations which are apparently in conflict, sitting together, having lunch, having fun.
It's important that there be a place where the people, even in conflict, could have a dialogue. Even if it's over a cup of coffee. Yeah.
It is, I would say, it's even more than a dialogue. It's just not a dialogue. It's a common understanding that, you know, we have to be beyond the dialogue because we have had dialogue. We understand that we don't want a conflict. What we understand is how do we go beyond this conflict situation and how do we are friends. We don't want to fight.
But we have, the human society has fought one against the other throughout almost all of human history.
Because,
and,
you know,
is there anything changing in terms of the overall technological capability, the extension of capability, or something that makes a truly universally seen peaceful existence between the various peoples of the world in a way that history has very difficulty achieving because there was so much isolation or some the unity, the global village nature of the human society is changing things through technology that makes possible something that has not been overwhelmingly characteristic of the human experience.
That's right, and I think that the technology has helped a lot. It has helped in a very big way. You know, people have access to televisions in the remotest part of Pakistan, in Bannu, and I'm sure India, Bangladesh, all these places, Afghanistan, and they can see satellite television, they can see other channels, they know what's happening around the world. But, you know, it's, like you said, it's a human nature. We have had conflicts. But I think we're moving forward. Maybe it's my optimist nature, but I think we're moving forward. I think we have a much better understanding of each other now, which we did not have earlier because we had not seen each other. No, we see each other on a daily basis through internet, through blogs, through Skype, through, you know, there's so many of these things, Facebook. And I mean, if you go on a Facebook, you would see people from a country having friends from all over the world.
Yes, that's right.
Even if it's just for the heck of it.
Yeah.
But, you know, this is the first step.
Sure, right. That's
really
the
first
important.
step.
Yeah,
and
an individual and we also have public access television, so that you and I can sit down and talk about these things and share it with a rather wide audience and so forth. And that's going on in other places. The more we can communicate, I think the better for the overall human society, don't you?
Right, yeah. It is.
You're optimistic for the human prospect.
I am.
Okay.
And I think you would have seen in a long time, we have moved forward, despite the fact that we do keep having these little conflicts.
Well,
but now the conflicts are moving more to something which I don't really want to call conflicts. I mean, there has been no war between the major adversaries in the recent past. And people believe in dialogue. They're not saying, listen, I'm not going to talk to you.
Where would we count the Second World War was there, and then we had the Korean intervention, and then we had the Vietnam. That was a major confrontation between the land-based Soviet Union and the sea-based United States and that. Yeah. That was a major confrontation.
Those were major. But
what was there?
But what did come out of it after the Second World War? There's the European Union.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, that's
true. They have one currency. They all look after each other's economy. Yeah. They want to be seen as almost one people.
I know. It's a major. That's an advance. Huh?
It's a great advance.
How far can we go to where we see everybody as one people? Well, I wonder. We end up with one.
I think we would be. You talked of African Union.
Well, yes, not only the African Union, but that's in place now, and it's an advance over the Organization of Africa, and that's a major continent, 53 nations, and not been well served in the colonial era. Yeah. We have the legacy of the colonial era, Eurocentric view of the world, institutions from there, and a lot of people have taken exception to that. So we've had political and different philosophical differences, but we're coming to understand better each other, perhaps.
Yeah, we are. You know, it's through technology. It's through games.
Games.
games have been another.
You mean like soccer or something?
Soccer,
or
cricket.
The only soccer and cricket I think are only Britain and Pakistan. I think it's in we play baseball and football.
Yeah, that's right.
And we're out of the step with the world on that one.
We have. I go back to the subcontinent. We have had something called cricket diplomacy.
Yes, indeed. Like ping pong diplomacy. We had too with China. Exactly. It was an opening to China.
So sports do play an important role.
Oh, yeah.
I think we can.
Not to mention culture in general.
Exactly.
Music is universal.
Yeah,
right?
Music is universal.
We had some people come to a thing where they had people from Africa. A number of people. There's an organization called the African Chamber of Commerce in the U.S. So you have business-oriented people, and then they had some culture. They had young people. They had a fellow named DJ Gaddafi. He had shades, and he was playing music as a DJ at this meeting where there were people who were trying to dance, and it was popular music coming out of Africa, and it, as the kids would say, rocked. It was really good, and and they're bringing it's from their own roots that they're bringing it, and then so we're introducing from the world instead of it being one way, Western European imposition of culture and so forth. It's beginning to be more of a melding, and we're getting rich. Threads of that overall pattern we from other parts of the world.
On the 12th of September, we had a concert in the General Assembly of United Nations. It was organized by a pop group of Pakistan. It's called Junoon.
Okay.
And I mean, it wasn't Junoon alone. They gathered artists from all over the world.
Okay.
And some through videos, some through. Some of them were there, and I mean, it was a gathering of almost all kind of nationalities, all kind of religions, and the one purpose they got together was to raise some awareness for the displaced people in Swat Valley.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's just and it was Indians and Pakistani. I mean, this Pakistani was singing, and there was Indian on tabla.
Yeah.
So it brings us together.
Now, what are the major problems that confront us that makes it so that we can't get to an institutional structure that could really move in a qualitative new way in terms of the peoples of the world? Do we need a qualitative change, or shall we just build? We want to anchor to history, but do we have to have alterations in our institutions and assumptions of a qualitative, a major change, like in evolution, you have punctuated equilibrium, a new thing, a really new thing, or even large measures like the Enlightenment that came, or the kind of, because we also have on the destructive side, we have a tremendous capability technologically brought to us for massive destruction on a scale that's unprecedented. There are some modelings that say weapons, if they were to be unleashed in a spasm of hatred or something, might actually be species lethal. Yeah. Do you understand? That's new. If that is the case, then it can only be measured in terms of modeling. But we have a capability of providing for everyone, and even the ecology that's unprecedented. But we also have a capability, if we go along the old way that so often has been the way nations have related, and unleashed weapons. We were trying in the Second World War as best we could to try and kill each other.
That's
firebombing and such ugly things, you understand? But if it was done now, apparently it's reached a point, I don't know if that's really the case, but it would be something that would be lethal to the whole, particularly some of the things in germ warfare and some of the black ops things that have been going on by countries trying to get an advantage over others in the traditional way.
But I think there's always a dialogue about those things in the United Nations, at different forums around the world. And there's always a dialogue between the leaders talking about limiting these things, limiting anything.
Major thrust now, if I'm not mistaken, with Mr. Moon, Baki Moon, and the new president of the General Assembly, Ali Traki, and in the UN auditorium, I mean in the hallway of the UN, they got a major force for disarmament and trying to back down from the destructive side of a technological
and to maybe use our energies in
peaceful
ways and more constructive ways. Maybe enlightening people. I think
again, communication is
important. And that's what I was
communication is important to everything.
I think it's so important that we understand each other.
Yes. If we understand each other, we will be able to.
It's very lately that people have started understanding Pashtuns.
That's what I think is very important at this moment to understand the Pashtun, because
and that Pashtuns are traditional people who actually believe in peace. They are not for any of these activities. They don't like terrorism in their own area, but they are subjected to it.
Terrorism is a word that's been used. I think George III called George Washington a terrorist. I know there were a number of people who called Nelson Mandela a terrorist for being in prison for 27 years against the thing of apartheid.
Right.
So it's a word that can be used just simply to be, well, that's our enemy. Yeah. You understand? And there is state terrorism, which is a major power, overwhelming with military ability to great loss of life and so forth in the name of the state, and they don't seem to factor into the notion of terrorism.
But of today, I do. But of today, I think there is a common understanding of when we talk of terrorism in that part of the world, in Afghanistan, and there are elements who are doing it and who are nothing but killing people. So that understanding is there, and the more we enlighten people, the more we educate people, and we separate the terrorist from the non-terrorist. I think that's what's important.
That's a very important thing, isn't it? You know, at the turn of the 19th and 20th century, it means there was keeping track of military loss between the nations of the world, and if I'm not mistaken, for every soldier for every 9 soldiers that died in the meadow fighting in a traditional way, lining up and there was 1 civilian casualty. By the time you got to the end of the century, it was 9 civilians for every military young man in the meadow fighting. So that it has become, with firebombing and such kind of things that destroy. And it can't be limited to where it destroys civilian population, which is, in a certain sense, a terrorist state of affairs.
That's
where you terrorize the other people, and it's part of a psychological thing. You understand?
But going back to
the state terrorism seems to be able to be, if you do it in the name of the state, and kill great millions, perhaps. But you're doing it in the name of the state, in the name of a war. It isn't called terrorism, but it is terror being delivered down on people in massive scale. And there ought to be a way that the powerful, who tend to laud it over the world, could be brought to the dock, perhaps, as well as just individuals or local groups who do things in an outlaw kind of way, you know. But it's a difficult question.
It's a difficult question, and really to identify this exactly what do we call that, and how do we bring people to justice. I think even in that field, the world has progressed a lot, and we have brought people to justice. We have the International Criminal Court, and there were leaders who were known for their war crimes have been brought to justice.
Okay, have there been leaders who did war crimes in the name of war who were they have in economics too big to fail. If you're too powerful to go into court, if you kill great numbers of people and it's called a war, then they retire in great honor. But they do not get in the dock. We don't have a way of bringing the mass destruction, which is through, you know, very often Roman legions were pretty nasty in terms of dealing with recalcitrant people and that sort of thing. So we still don't have a way of bringing the... you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
And it must be a great deal of resentment on the part of some of the least advantaged people in the world, which is the vast majority, with the overlording attitude of some of those who have the ability to impose, as they did in colonial times, with the Gatling gun or with the new weapons that came along and so forth. That history is a nightmare, James Joyce had.
That's right.
Daedalus say.
I don't know. I mean, I really won't be able to comment on that because it's a bit complicated. It's very complicated, and going in there is complicated in itself. Talking about it
but communication among the peoples, and the more the people can participate, rather than just certain special interests who have an economic or a special interest involved in terms of manipulating or intimidating the people, that's something that we would want to encourage. Democratization and encouraging and understanding by the people is a good direction for us to be going, and the technology seems to be taking us there. whether we want to or not.
It is,
Democracy's
exactly. Technology,
in the air.
exactly.
Yeah.
Technology is taking us there, whether
Yeah.
we want it or not.
Uh-huh.
It's unleashed, it's uncontrollable, and people are, whatever happens anywhere.
It was the UN, I think they want to say, to beat the swords into plowshares was the original purpose of the UN, was to save mankind from the scourge of war. Yeah. And that's one of the things I should think you'd be pleased working on the peacekeeping and the logistics of peacekeeping efforts on the part of that noble institution. You must feel a very good sense of satisfaction using your education. You've learned a great deal. And I would congratulate you on that.
Thank you so much.
No, it's my great good pleasure to agree with you on that. And I hope, believe me, I hope fervently that you're right, that the side is on the trend of history is toward mutual understanding, ever increasingly so, that would lead to the conditions of a lasting peace. It is on our side. I think the
trend of history is on our side. We are going to win. We the people.
Okay, how do we identify them? How do we identify the them? We've done it in terms of geopolitical interests in the past.
Yeah, the them are, I think, few, and we should be able to overwhelm them.
Overwhelm or perhaps subsume?
I would say, I would use the word because overwhelming is more about the power of negotiation, talking.
Well,
and overwhelming people's ideas, their
ideologies. It would be good if we could have an understanding of things that is so comprehensively appropriate that could be understood by everybody, even those who feel a responsibility to anchor us to history. Yeah. But that we're going to need a new change, and change is difficult, we understand that. But if it could involve everybody in terms of their own association with the idea of which they're a part, that would be part of a synergy that would be perhaps necessary for us to realize a big qualitative change.
But it is happening.
You do think? Yeah, there's signs of it, aren't
It's really happening.
You must see signs of it as you walk through and do your daily job.
It's happening. You know, I travel a lot, and I see this change every day. I do find people embracing each other. People who didn't know about each other now know about each other because of the technology, because of the communication. And it is the general trend is that people want to like each other, want to love each other. They don't want to.
I think that could be part of human nature, and I congratulate you on holding that throughout your good and interesting life. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. We've already come to the end of 58 minutes, but I want to thank you.
Thank you so much.
No, my pleasure. We scratched the surface. Forgive my ignorance and so forth, but it's been your pleasure to have the perceptions then of Maqbool Mohammad. He's had a very interesting life. He's got a great deal to contribute toward understanding the world in many very interesting and crucial dimensions involving not only where he was born and where he comes from, a crucial part of the area now of the world that we should all understand. And now he's working in the vineyard of bringing understanding and peacekeeping capability to the United Nations, a laudable thing. And I thank you very much for coming in. It's a great pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for having me.
We would invite you to tune in. We'll be coming back again tomorrow. One more time, thank you, Maqbool, very, very much for such a very well-led life that continues. And thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So we'll just be putting the graphic up. We've got it up, and we've gone to black. So now if they've gone to black, that means there's no point in talking anymore, because if it's not...